I think that November 2024 may well go down as a pivotal month in American history. Today, I've invited my longtime friend and former business associate, Ron Austin, to join me online to discuss some of the developments and implications of a second Donald Trump term.
So let's just start off, okay? I mean, what do you think of the American election? I mean, the things that have happened in the last 3 weeks have just astounded me. What?
I
What?
I must admit I am somewhat astounded as well. In 2016, I wasn't very popular because I was predicting Trump's victory at the time, and I just had a bad feeling about what I saw. And I don't think it was an entirely legitimate victory, but it was he won, and that I kind of saw that coming. I guess this time around, we all listen to the kind of sources that we prefer, and in my little echo chamber, I thought that Kamala Harris was doing pretty well, and I thought that her
the campaign went really well, and then that last week, from the time of the Madison Square Garden rally, from then on, it just all the momentum seemed to be going towards Harris. Everything.
Yeah, but that was kind of in our world. That moment, it were obviously you and I, and we're Canadians, and we probably line up with more of the Americans in California and New York and so forth, just because that's where we're at, and so that's the kind of sources we were listening to. But that's not what most of the voters were listening to, I guess.
Exactly. The other thing, I watch a lot of YouTube channels and content creators, and there's a lot of pro-democracy sites out there. But they seem to focus every day on just how bad the Trump campaign was, how horrible he was, how everything's falling apart. If you watch them, you would have believed Trump was going to walk in to get 20% of the vote. I mean, that's what they're selling.
Right. Yeah. Well, and of course, the sad thing is that what really surprised me, I wasn't so much surprised that Trump, quote unquote, won, but that he had what looks like, alas, a very solid victory.
Yeah.
He won all of those swing states that people kept talking about.
All 7.
And he won the popular vote. And so that I didn't think was possible for him.
Yeah.
I really thought that if he won, it would be through kind of skullduggery, and yet the electorate have spoken, and I think more people voted for Kamala Harris than voted for Biden. So that must mean that a whole bunch more Trump voters came out of the woodwork, and than in 2020 or 2016 for that matter. So there's a lot of Americans who support Donald Trump.
One of the things that really shocked me is, obviously I'm not a Trump fan, and I can throw a lot of insults at him, but he's not deceptive. He's open and honest. Not honest, wrong term. But he tells people what he's going to do. Okay? That last 2 weeks was telling everybody exactly what he plans to do. I couldn't believe how blatant he was about it. Just everything, just rhyming it off one at a time, what he's going to do, and outrageous things, evil things.
Well, let's talk about what is he going to do, actually. So let's talk about stuff like tariffs, for instance. The tariffs are, big in the Trump world.
Yes.
Do you think we're going to see 20% tariffs across the board?
It would be insane. I understand economics well enough. I mean, from day one, Trump did not know how tariffs work. He really did not understand what they were or how they work. I mean, there is some benefit to tariffs for protecting an industry, but not the way he talks about it. To him, it was free money. It was going to pay for everything. This would pay all the bills. I mean, every economic forum out there who looked at the two plans for Harris and Trump, as far as their economic plans, basically preferred Harris's plan, even from the point of view of deficit, government spending.
Sure.
Hawks.
Sure.
But
so here's my comment on those tariffs. I mean, I start with asking a question: who actually paid for the wall between the U.S. and Mexico? Is there such a wall? Yeah, a bunch of it got fortified, I guess, over the last 8 years. But the border, but who actually paid for it? And it was, I mean, that's nobody ever went back to fact check him on that. So I don't believe that he's going to put 20% tariffs across the board. Wall Street won't let him do it. And Wall Street is probably the one check that he will actually pay attention to. If he's going to destroy the economy, then he'll pause. And so, in the first term, he threw up some tariffs, but then he exempted people like his own Trump industry, and things like that. So I think you're going to see some what I'm going to call performative tariffs. There's going to be some tariffs thrown in to kind of make a lot of noise. He's going to give exemptions to his friends, but he's not going to take it to the point where it will destroy the economy. People will stop buying imported goods, and then 2 years later, there will be no revenue from tariffs because people won't be buying imported goods. So the whole argument that you can replace income taxes with tariffs is quite absurd.
Yeah. And if he thinks that he can save the auto industry, when people find out that they're going out to pay $70,000 now instead of $40,000 for the car they want to buy, they're not going to be very happy about that.
Right.
And
so I don't think that a lot of the stuff that he says he's going to do, he's only going to do it in a performative way. He will definitely make a lot of noise around tariffs, but I can't believe it'll be the substantive action that he was talking about.
Okay, let's go to the dark side. Trump was really adamant, vocal about his political opponents and bringing them to task for the actions they've taken against him and against the media. One of his first actions was to appoint Matt Gaetz, or to try to appoint Matt Gaetz as his attorney general, which was just outrageous. I mean, the chief law enforcement officer in the country. And Matt Gaetz is a true loyalist who has always stuck up for Trump and has no idea of what's right and wrong legally. But Trump was ready to do that. He's not bluffing. I mean, he wanted to do that.
Well, my view on the Gaetz appointment is maybe a little bit different. There was a joke went around. That's as good as it gets, right? So I believe that he probably thought there was a 1% chance of getting Matt Gaetz into that position, but he did it as he trolled everybody. He trolled the Senate. He said, "Here, I'm going to put the worst person possible into this position, and you can't second guess me." Well, they second guessed him pretty quickly. So that's actually good pushback. That between the Fourth Estate and the other powers that be, they got rid of that guy pretty quick. But I think that was probably the expected plan all along. Nobody's going to look very hard at the next one coming along, Bondi, which. The joke is that he calls her Blondie, right?
Yeah.
And whether she's good or bad, there's going to be very little attention paid. It's just the fact that she's not Gaetz.
Yeah. So, well, I think that near the
he wasn't really serious about that. Sorry.
Near the end of his first term, it really was the attorney general position that was concerning me and many people. The things that Bill Barr was doing for him, as well as the election itself, as far as trying to delegitimize it, okay? But Trump seemed to really believe the attorney general was there for his benefit. And he really seems to misunderstand what the function's about. And it's a very important function. And that concerns me a lot, to be honest with you.
Well, of course, we have these systems where we include our attorney generals within the cabinet structure of government, and they report to the head of state. And what could go wrong in that situation?
Yeah.
But as long as your politicians are honest, it's okay. But now we're finding the limits of that model. It's pretty scary. And I think that there's always been a certain amount of arm's length, and he tried to get past that, and he wasn't I guess with his third guy or fourth guy, whoever Barr was, he kind of did. But the woman that's coming in, she's been an attorney general somewhere else, so presumably she has some sense of the rule of law and so forth. And we'll see. Will he completely suborn that, that position, or will he actually be subject to the rule of law still? Who knows?
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. Do you think there's any regrets on the part of voters?
Do you think what?
Any regrets on the part of voters that they woke up the next day and said, "What did we do?" I mean, I've heard that regret by people.
Alas, I don't think so. I think that there's an old thing about people deserve the government they get, especially in a democracy. No, I think people had 8 years, 10 years to fess out this guy. He has had what we call disqualifying behavior from the get-go. He made fun of town people. That should have disqualified him from the public sphere 10 years ago.
What I said, he's not deceptive. He puts out who he is and what he believes in.
Exactly. Yeah. So no, I think that there may be buyer's remorse 6 months down the road or a year down the road, but I think at the moment there's a pretty sad bunch of progressive Americans, and they're in the minority, and the majority is unfortunately decided to live in an alternate reality. Really,
so you think Americans want Trump, or 50% of Americans want Trump, that they really buy what he's selling, which tends
to keep him out. So no, I have to agree. Yes, they do. They seem to want that.
And a large part of that is authoritarian rule. I mean, he's a strong man. He wants to be a strong man and make decisions unilaterally.
And here's the sobering thought. Here's a sobering thought. He got 52% of the popular vote nationwide, something like that.
It's been recounted. It's basically down to 49 to 50. Camel's at 49, he's at 50.
Okay, well, I thought it was a little higher, but again,
there's a lot more counting coming in afterwards.
He got half. He got a slim majority of the vote, perhaps.
Yes.
In 1933, in Germany, Hitler only got 44% of the vote. The election that there was he did the Reichstag fire a few days before the vote. They got everybody scared, and even under those circumstances, Hitler only got 44% of the vote, and he went ahead and took over the country shortly after that as a dictator. Americans delivered a substantially bigger, slice of the electorate to Trump, and that to me is, alas, a very sobering thought.
And for at least 2 years, it's going to be the House of Representatives and the Congress, and for decades to come, the Supreme Court. But I mean, right now, I don't know what the guardrails. I don't know what the guardrails are on Trump.
I heard of Rand Paul at least was speaking up today, and Rand Paul, as you know, is Ron Paul's son, right?
Yeah,
and he's been somewhat of a mainstream Republican, but trying to maybe curry his father's libertarian, support and so forth. He's pushing back on Trump. He is saying that they can't. He's all for deporting 30,000, criminals, but you can't use the army to do it. You've got to use the courts. You've got to use the Fourth Amendment, as he mentioned it, which is the right to the proper legal due course and so forth. So I think people will start to push back against this guy, but it may be too late. We'll see. Speaking of which, what do you think about the mass deportation promise or scenario?
There's several aspects to it. Aside from the humanitarian aspect, which is very real, there's the economic aspect. I mean, the majority of these people who are going to be deported work gainfully. They are employed in tasks and jobs. And I don't know what's going to happen.
In the lowest wage sector of the economy.
Agreed, okay? And it's one of the things that allows the American economy to continue is that low-paid slave labor, if you want to call it that, okay? Whether it's the farmers' fields or wherever it happens, or these sweatshops.
Yeah,
If you take that labor away,
sorry, go ahead.
just if you take that labor away, I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it would be very destructive.
I read that half of the farm labor, the agricultural labor, is illegal.
Yeah.
Half of it, about 1 million people. And, you know, we can't pay, as they're calling them, heritage Americans.
That's a good line. I like that.
That's the new term. They won't do those jobs, and they won't do them for the kind of wages that the illegal immigrants are. So, again, I think the deportation story is going to be a lot like the Tariff story. There's going to be a lot of performative deportation. They'll make a lot of noise. They'll scare a lot of people. But the ultimate object of it is to keep those people in their place. Make sure that there's a new term for the proletariat. We call it the precariat. And it's the people who are precarious in their existence. And so if you're worried that you're going to be deported tomorrow, you're not going to complain about either your wages or your working conditions. And that's what I think is sadly, you're going to see some very high level or highly publicized deportations, but they can't take 15 million people out of the economy and still expect to have the lifestyle there.
Yeah, I think the point you're hitting on is, you went back to 2016. Trump's main campaign promise then was, I will build a wall all across the southern border and Mexico will pay for it. That was a large part of his campaign in 2016. And frankly, very little of that got done. Yes, he took initiatives on the border, but the number of miles of wall that was built and Mexico never paid for it. So you're suggesting that a lot of what he's talking about even now is going to go that way.
Exactly. I do believe that he just there's very little sort of follow up in the public space. Where were people either 4 years ago or this year following around saying, what happened to the wall? Why didn't Mexico pay it? I think one of the questions you put on our agenda for today is what about the media? Well, I think the media started. It happened before the election. The Washington Post and the LA Times declined to endorse a candidate, so I think that people like Bezos were basically trying to make good.
And Joe and Mika on Morning Joe have headed down to say hello and kiss the ring.
Yeah, I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. Not hearing you. It's my speakers are way over on the other side of the room there. Okay. So you just have to enunciate, I guess, for me to hear. Okay. And I will edit part out. Sorry. Say that again.
I was just saying that you have Morning Joe, Mika, and Joe Scarborough.
Okay. Right.
Visiting Mar-a-Lago and kissing the ring.
Yeah, I guess so. You must watch more TV than I do, because I don't follow those those personalities. But yeah, I did see a headline to that effect. So
they're one of the big morning talk shows on MSNBC, and they've spent much of the last 4 or 5 years condemning Trump. And on Friday, they announced that they were going to visit him to establish communications, so they could report on him properly. And they had lunch with him and dinner with him. And there's a lot of progressives very upset with them now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all part of the sane washing that's been going on by the media. They've been basically laundering most of the stuff of the messages of Trump and making it sound coherent. Although you said you followed his rallies fairly closely.
Yes.
And you saw a lot of coherence from Trump, did you?
Yeah. It's
the outtakes that I saw made him look like a crazy guy. These little 60-second clips that they showed up on social media. But you're saying in between that, he was actually
Trump was delivering what he promised and giving his fans what they wanted. He was standing up there. He was black and white. This is my policy. This is what we're going to do. He stayed on message. yes, he did go off on tangents all the time, but nobody seemed to bother it. Nobody seemed to care about it. They were quite content and happy to hear his message. And that last week, the representation of his rallies was really misleading. They were showing people leaving the rallies en masse, and they were showing people up. That wasn't the reality of it. His message was still getting across. What do you make of the whole Elon Musk Billionaire Boys Club aspect to this?
Well, Elon Musk is a interesting character. He's he's a South African immigrant who was educated partly here in Canada.
Yeah.
Yes. And apparently became an illegal immigrant to the United States and worked there illegally, although Elon Musk might sue me for having said that. But that's apparently what happened. So he is, I think, very scared of the regulatory agencies in the U.S., whether they be environmental agencies or labor agencies. And they're starting to breathe down his neck. He did a lot of his production in China where he could get away with a lot of stuff. He didn't like the kind of things he was running into in America. He's moved his headquarters to Texas and much of his operations because he thinks the political climate is going to be more, advantageous to him there. So I think 4 months before the election, 5 months before the election, Musk was an apolitical figure. He had not weighed in on either side, and all of a sudden, he becomes a huge MAGA supporter. So I think it was. I don't think he supports Donald Trump, likes him very much, but he saw a vehicle to get him and his cronies into power so that they could basically blunt the power of the state and keep the inspectors out of his environmental issues and keep the inspectors out of his labor issues. And there's several others. So personally, I think that was Musk's big motivation. He's he's known as somebody who comes in and breaks things. I used to follow Twitter. I've given up on Twitter now because he, as far as I'm concerned, and a lot of people are, also agree that he broke it. So you've run a company, Nick. You know that it's easy to go in and break things. Maybe the company that took over your company did a lot of that because they had this sense of they could create their own reality. Yeah. But the truth is that whether it's company or government, there's people make it work. And is there waste? There's always waste in companies, always waste in government. It's part of being human. But we have pretty good societies here. Canada works pretty well. United States works pretty well. And a lot of the reasons they work well is because they have big governments that do a lot of good things. They keep the environment clean. They spread the money around the people who need it, and they educate the populace. They build roads and put up stop signs. Government does a lot of wonderful things. Yeah. And you can't just go in and say you're going to wipe out a third of the government because it's you can say that, but you actually can't get away with that and expect the society to keep functioning properly. That's unfortunately
Elon Musk came out of PayPal, didn't he? He was a founding partner of PayPal, was he not?
He was part of PayPal, yeah, with Peter Thiel, yeah.
With Peter, what's his name?
I think it's pronounced Thiel, T-H-E-I-L.
Thiel. Peter Thiel.
How do you pronounce it?
Pardon?
With T-H? Okay.
Thiel.
Anyway, they're both South African immigrants.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. You sent me a link about J.D. Vance, and I don't know a lot about J.D. Vance. I actually watched a movie about his life that Ron Howard did. Okay, the week before the election. Okay. And it makes him look pretty tame. Now, I then read some of the things about what went on in the last few years in his history with Peter Thiel and a few other people. Tell me more about this. What went on?
Well, I'm not an expert on it, but that article that I sent you, it refers to Yarvin, this guy, Yarbin, as being the sort of the philosophical a guru of these guys, and he's also been involved in these various in venture capital companies. So J.D. Vance joined, I believe, it's Peter Thiel's venture capital company and raised money and learned how to do that. And perhaps the story is that they recognized some potential in J.D. Vance, and so they groomed him, and he went off to start his own venture fund back in the East, and they helped support that. They bought into that, and then they promoted him into becoming a U.S. senator. He was somebody, his quotes 4 years ago, just prior to running for the Senate, he was not a Trump supporter. He, in fact, we actually know can compare Trump to Hitler. So I think he's another Johnny-come-lately, just like Elon Musk is and so forth. They've seen a vehicle in Trump that they can use. And, if Trump doesn't survive his presidency, he's 78 or isn't able to be confident, then you've got this young guy who's come out of Silicon Valley who's your president. And some people are speculating he may be the de facto president from day one. Based on what you've said, Trump has a few more cycles left in him at this point. So, and he doesn't like.
No, he does not like playing. No, he does not like strong second in command.
No,
that's not his thing.
So he likes people to kiss the ring, basically, right?
Let's bring this home for a minute.
No.
One of the reasons that I set up this channel and I called it Beyond America, Canada Looking South, was I read the results of a survey and in January and another one in March of 2024 that astounded me about how many Canadians support a Trump-like leadership in Canada. And the statistics on comparing who would you prefer, Biden to Trump, heavily towards Trump amongst conservatives and especially amongst young men under 30.
Yeah.
Strong support.
Well, I blame the lack of civic education. I think that when we grew up in school, there was still a some desire to raise a generation that would be aware of their fellow humans and aware of and have some pride in civic strength and so forth. And I think there's been so much that's fallen by the wayside, and people are just the internet has not helped, unfortunately. And initially it seemed to be a great equalizer, but now it's allowed people to just go into their own echo chambers, and people are making these decisions to just listen to the sources they want to instead of trying to broaden their horizons. And I think that level of support in Canada has gone up steadily for the 8 years. I don't believe that Trump was embraced even by the Conservatives 8 years ago here, whereas now he is. Does that agree with what you know?
Yeah. As I've looked around, I mean, Pierre Poilievre is fine. What scares me about him is his followers, not him. When I hear the supporters he has and their ideas and their views of what's going on, it's a dangerous situation.
I'd really like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch this video today. I really love making this content, and I appreciate your support and encouragement. You can best help me if you want to see more content by doing a couple of things. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave comments. I love to hear what you've got to say, and I respond as soon as I can whenever possible. Thanks an awful lot, and have yourself a great week.